Well, first I want to say that Matt Wilson also, of course, has played here a number of other times. Most recently at Sanctuary, I believe, about 3 years ago. And I believe Mr. Cardenas was with you on that date. And yes?
Yes.
No? Maybe not.
No.
Okay, you were with Ben Allison.
Yeah, Ben Allison.
About the same time.
That's right,
And,
man.
of course, Paul Motian died November 22nd. And I'm just going to let these gentlemen talk. Steve, your thoughts? Anything about Paul Motian that you want to start with?
Wow, where would we start? Incredible musician, legendary musician. I was in his band for 14 years, and Chris maybe 3 years before that, actually. And it started out as the Electric Bebop Band, and sometime around 2004, he started to make it a bigger ensemble. Added viola, which Matt Maneri will be playing with us today, and piano, who was Jacob Sachs. And sometimes we had two bass players, Jerome Harris and Thomas Morgan, and Ben Monder and I played guitar in the band. But there was a few other kind of floating members, and then other original members of that band. Well, Joshua Redman played the first incarnation, and Kurt Rosenwinkel and Brad Shepard. It had a great membership, and of course Paul, his trio with Bill Frisell and Joe Lovano is, for me, one of the great all-time jazz trios. And he also had Trio 2000 with Masabumi, Kikuchi, and that also had a kind of a rotating membership in terms of horns and bass players. But Paul was an amazing original drummer as well as an amazing original composer. So we're celebrating his life on all those levels. He's a band leader, drummer, great musician, composer, everything.
And of course, speaking of trios, Paul was a member of the Bill Evans trio that made the famous recordings for Orrin Keepnew's Riverside records label with the Village Vanguard, records that I'm sure influenced Matt and just about anybody that plays any kind of jazz. Matt, do you want to share your recollections of the first time you heard that stuff?
Yeah, I got Sunday Night at the Village Vanguard, I believe, was the first one that I had of that series. But I really liked. There's an earlier one too with Teddy Kotick playing bass. What's that one called?
Explorations?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, no, Explorations.
No,
LaFaro.
yeah.
Oh, right.
It's prior to that. And Teddy Kotick was a bass player that lived in Boston. And on that recording, Paul sounds very Max Roach-like in the way he's playing. But I just had a nice hang with Tootie Heath, and it was a great story. One of the last times I really hung out with Paul was at the Village Vanguard, and Ethan Iverson was playing down the street at Smalls with Ben Street and Tootie. And we're talking, and Steve and I are hanging with Paul, and Paul goes, we said something, he goes, I think Ethan Iverson's down the street at Smalls with Tootie Heath.
We were playing at the band.
Yeah, you guys were playing at the band. Yeah. So he said, let's go down there. So we walked down there, and Paul went. Smalls has a long, narrow room, so he walked right up next to the drums, the bandstand, and Tootie looked over and said, "You old bald blank." Tootie said to him, and he said, "Takes one bald blank to know another bald blank." It was great, and they hadn't seen each other. Tootie was saying that they probably hadn't seen each other for like 30 years or something like that. So it was really incredible, and he was just saying today that I thought it was a really nice observation that the way Paul played time with Bill Evans never got in the way of any of Bill's ideas. He said other drummers, but he said the way Paul and Scott, they would be on their own and then come together in this really organic way. He said, but he never got in the way of Bill's ideas, and the fluidity of that was very amazing. I think one of the greatest things, and I'll let Chris talk about it, but I think from a drummer's perspective, or any musician's perspective about Mr. Motian, was how his respect of the song, I mean, to me, all great musicians play songs really, really well, and he was you know, the ultimate example of playing within the structure of a song and really having that freedom. So one of the great things I think that he did for me in later years was when he did like the trio record, the Monk in Motion music, and but the way he played Monk's music was great. The way he played the American Songbook, he had such a big respect for the American Songbook tunes, and knew really the right melodies. I heard stories about him saying stuff to guys like, you know, I would play like not a club date per se, but like a reception or something. Guys would play wrong melodies on standards and things, you know. So it's funny, Roy Haynes is very much the same way. They really know the melodies of these songs really well. So I think that was something that's amazing, and then I think that really was an influence on how he composed, because how he played with the structure of his own tunes were amazing too. So he was a great song player. So Joe Lovano talks about that a lot about Paul. But, you know, the way he played the songs really something else.
Chris, can you give us a little insight as to, well, how did you come about playing with him? How did you...
No, that's what I want to know. I
Yeah.
don't know that either.
Oh, well, I'm not sure exactly. I remember I was in Paris playing with a group, and I called home to Brooklyn to check my messages, and they told me that Paul Motian had been trying to call me or something, and that they thought it was a good idea if I called him back immediately. So I called him, and he asked me to do this record date, the Reincarnation of a Lovebird record. And before that, I had been working with Wolfgang Muthspiel, and Wolfgang had hired Paul to do some gigs, and they had done some tours, and I think Paul must have heard us play in New York at some point, and Kurt Rosenwinkel was in the band at the time, and I think maybe he recommended me also to Paul. And then, yeah, after we did the record, there was a tour, and then I was just in the band after that, because with Paul, as long as you didn't sub out any gigs, he wouldn't fire you. I kept hoping he would fire me, just because it was so terrifying to play with him. But I never canceled out on any of the gigs, so I just stayed in the band.
Good point.
And Steve and I did a number of tours with him in Europe. You know, we took the trains all over the place, and up until when he had his heart surgery, his bypass surgery was it 2003? 2003. Then after that, he didn't get on airplanes anymore. Probably one of the last times he got on a plane was to come here.
Actually, yeah. Well, because we played here in 2002, but it was the Paris concert we did that fall.
Okay.
Last time.
So yeah, like Steve was saying, in 2002 was, I guess, the last time he flew. After that, he just stayed in New York and worked at the Village Vanguard and the Blue Note, and did a lot of recording sessions. And you know, people would come over from Europe and hire him to record and play. And Steve and I continued to work with him. You know, we also played at Birdland. That was another club that he liked to play at.
You know, I wanted to make a point about, he had double bypass surgery in 2003, but he was plenty healthy to tour. It was just a personal decision. He'd been on the road so much, you know, up to that point, that when he'd never had like 3-4 solid months off. And then the first gig that he did after the doc said he could play was with Paul Bley and Peacock at Birdland, because I went to that, I remember, and he sounded amazing, of course, right away. And he just said that even though the doctor said, oh, you know, you're healthier than you were before this, you can tour all you want. And Paul just said, no, you know, I'm sick of it. I don't want to step on another plane again. I'm done. And he meant it, because he told me about some of the offers he got. And I couldn't believe he turned down.
Yeah.
And he was just like, no.
People were begging him to come. You know,
Right, cats.
There's Matt Mayer and Thomas Morgan.
Yeah.
Other Paul Motian alumni.
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, those last 10 years were probably some of the most productive.
Yeah.
And busy years of his life, actually, in New York, and he was working all the time.
record dates, other people's groups, because he would play in some other piano players, trios.
Yeah, he never slowed down. And that's one of the most amazing things about him. I think as a person and as a musician, he never kind of like settled into being Paul Motian or you know, trying to do what he had always done. He was always composing and looking for new things and new music and looking for new things and old music and he had a real childlike quality about him in the sense that he was always kind of curious and seeing things differently and looking for new things and just there was a sense of wonder about him and which was really amazing, you know, and kind of contagious. And physically his death really took us all by surprise because I just assumed he would live to be 100 at least, you know, because he was so strong and so tough, you know, like just physically and mentally and musically, you know, and he just hit the drums so he could hit the drums so freaking hard, you know, like as loud as any drummer I've played with, yeah. And he could also be as dynamic and delicate as you can imagine and as you can hear, you know. But to me, it just seemed like his arc just kept going up and up and up. You know, it never kind of settled, and it was just really amazing. You know, and he just had a young outlook. You know, and he never seemed like an old person. I mean, he was always pushing himself and like never satisfied, in a good way. You know, I mean. He was always out running every morning. You know, he'd get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning and run a couple miles, and he was just always pushing and always looking to the next thing. He was never dwelling in the past. I mean, that's why he never really liked to do interviews or talk about Bill Evans, because he didn't like to think about the past too much. He was always being in the present and looking to the future.
That's true.